Just found this centipede here that I'm holding. Unfortunately, it was about to escape me, so I couldn't record myself catching it. But anyway, this is a species in the genus Scolopendra, and quite likely the only one in that genus that is found on the Osa Peninsula where we are right now. I've seen this one a couple times before, and I've seen quite a few photos of it as well. From what I gather, this should be a full-grown adult. Really not too large of a Scolopendra. In fact, the Otostigmus out here might get larger than this species, which, by the way, I don't know which species this is. Like a lot of smaller tropical Scolopendrids, this centipede that we have here is semi-arboreal. You don't find them in trees very often. They mostly crawl up on plants that are low to the ground and have relatively thin stems. Most likely what's going on is that they're hunting for prey, which is small insects. There's quite a large number of small cockroaches out here on the plants. And by searching thin stems, if they do come across potential prey, that prey doesn't have many places to go. This is assuming that the insect they're trying to eat cannot just fly away. I mentioned earlier that this might be the only Scolopendra species that's on the Osa Peninsula. This is actually the only Scolopendra I've seen in Costa Rica. That's not to say that definitively it is the only species in Costa Rica, because it's not. But I will say that this country is not a good place to be searching for Scolopendrids, especially as far as the tropics go. Tonight we are in Costa Rica's Osa Peninsula, and we are looking for a very cool species of snake called the red-eyed tree snake, or otherwise the tropical flat snake. This is one of my favorites out here, and we should be able to see a couple in this kind of habitat. We have a land crab hanging out here on the ground. This one right here. This is a species that does not have a common name. I said species, but I meant to say genus. I don't know which species this is, but it belongs to the genus Ptychophallus, which, again, does not have a common name. This is a semi-terrestrial genus. As these crabs grow older, they move further and further away from streams and rivers. When they are juveniles, they live directly in the streams and rivers, submerged in the water. Then when they get slightly larger, they create burrows under the rocks on the side of the stream or river. And then finally, when they're adults, they wander off in the hills to make burrows further away from streams and rivers. So I guess as adults we can call these land crabs, but when they're smaller, not so much. In terms of diet, these crabs are extreme generalists. They eat fallen fruits, some decaying matter, dead animals, and hunt live ones as well. I have seen them holding onto prey that was still alive on a couple of occasions, but they can generally be described as highly opportunistic feeders. This genus of crabs can be found in Nicaragua, Costa Rica, and Panama. And like I said, the adults live in burrows, but the easiest way to see them wandering about, like the one we have here, is to walk around at night after heavy rains. We have a Siphlophis compressus moving around in these vines here. Might be a little tough for me to catch. Here it is. The tropical flat snake is really an unmistakable species out here. Between the incomplete and spaced out bands, red body, pale head, and red eyes, you can tell which species of snake this is at a first glance. And speaking of these red eyes, this is one of very few snake species in Costa Rica that possess this trait. Could have been interesting if it was this snake that became famous for its red eyes instead of the red-eyed tree frog, a species that Costa Rica is well known for, of course. This particular snake that we have here has a great deal of parasites. These should be nematodes, and they were most likely transmitted to this snake at some point from its prey. I'm referring to all of the little bumps underneath its scales. This genus is somewhat diverse. It contains 7 species, and 2 of those species, including this one, can be found in Central America. Only one of those, however, can be found in Costa Rica. Siphlophis compressus is the northernmost ranging species in this genus. The 5 other species in this genus that aren't found in Central America live in South America, unsurprisingly. We have a snake here that I have never seen before. This is Sibon dimidiatus, a species of snail-eating snakes. This snake is commonly referred to as the slender snail sucker, or snail-eating snake, and it has a fairly wide distribution. This one is found in southern Mexico, as well as all the Central American countries with the exception of Panama. It hasn't formally been found from Panama, but there's every possibility that it lives there as well, since there are records from Costa Rica only a few kilometers from the border. Throughout the species' distribution, it tends to be uncommon, with relatively few areas where it can be reliably found. And throughout its distribution, it can vary quite a bit, both in pattern and in color. For example, you can tell that this one is quite green and blotchy, but many of these snakes have very clear bands, and many of them are more gray and orange. This snake reminds me of an eyelash viper that I saw not too long ago. This is the Christmas tree morph of the Central American eyelash viper, Bothriochus nigradispersus, and you can tell that it is also blotched and has approximately the same coloration. Both of these are arboreal and found in this area. We have a couple Passalid beetles hanging around this dead log here. There's a smaller one, and there's a larger one right here. Apologies for not being specific with my identification. I don't even know which genus these beetles are from, or if they even are from the same genus. They might or might not be the same species. These are either in the genus Passalidae, Varus, or Ptychophallus, all three of which roughly have the same ecology. As a group, they're commonly referred to as Bess bugs or Bess beetles. I didn't even find these two beetles next to each other. The smaller one just happened to fly in by coincidence. And on that smaller one, I did take notice of 4 Pseudoscorpions, using it as a kind of flying taxi. I don't know why this is, but the famous harlequin beetle, which is a species of longhorn beetle, or cerambycid, is most well known for carrying these Pseudoscorpions, especially underneath its elytra. But this is something that a lot of beetles do, including this Bess beetle that we're looking at. Pseudoscorpions like to live under bark, so they hitch rides on beetles that also like bark. Bess beetles spend most of their time in wood. This symbiotic relationship that the Pseudoscorpions and the beetle have is called phoresis. In this relationship, the beetle is the host, and the Pseudoscorpion is the phoront, or phoretic. This refers to species that use a host to get from one place to another. But by far, the most common phoronts on Bess beetles are mites. These phoretic mites are found on the ventral side of Bess beetles, as well as other beetle groups, and they bunch up around leg joints, especially on the thorax. Whoa, not the most graceful creature. Alright, well, I don't want to stress it out too much, so I'm going now. Here's our second tropical flat snake. This red-eyed tree snake is a juvenile, and this reminds me of Leptodeira. Leptodeira are the cat-eyed snakes, and they generally look quite similar to Siphlophis. But I'll try to go find a cat-eyed snake after this to explain one of the odd similarities between these two snakes. And since we have a juvenile here, specifically a neonate most likely, I'd like to point out that its head is quite white compared to the last one that we found. Their head does darken a little bit over time. This snake's diet mainly consists of lizards, but otherwise it is quite a generalist. These also feed on other snakes, frogs, reptile and amphibian eggs, birds, and mammals. Despite how relatively normal they look in terms of shape and size, these can feed on remarkably large prey. They have been observed eating adult basilisks and small iguanas. The red-eyed tree snake is another one of those tropical snake species that is associated with running water. And more generally, they also have a preference for primary forest, especially areas that are humid and cool. And since I pointed it out on the last snake, I also want to show you that on this one, there is one parasite, this little bump here. Hopefully it doesn't end up with as many as the other one though. After briefly mentioning that cat-eyed snake, Leptodeira, I'm going to go try to find one. There's an area around here where I've seen quite a few of them. I wish I could see a juvenile, but that's not going to happen. The last time I saw one was a few weeks ago. But finding an adult should be really doable. We have a tree frog up here in this tree. Very appropriate. And down here, there's another one of the same species. And also I think I saw one hop over this way. Yes, right here. There's another one. You might have noticed that this second one here has a spider web attached to its head. This is the way I found it. I guess it's been sitting here long enough for that to happen, but I'm not sure why it tolerated a little spider walking around next to its eye. Or maybe it hopped onto this branch and hit the web in doing so, which then stuck to its face. These tree frogs are Smilisca sordida, otherwise known as the Veragua cross-banded tree frog, or Drab tree frog. This frog lives in Honduras, Nicaragua, Costa Rica, Panama, and Colombia, and there is a possibility that it ranges into El Salvador as well. Now, I'm not so sure if these vary in color and pattern over their distribution, but I do know that these vary in color in single locations. Around here I've seen ones that were brown, gray, yellow, green, as well as somewhat pinkish orange on a couple of occasions. And I think some of that is due in part to their ability to change colors. Usually this transition happens from day to night, but it can also happen right in front of your eyes in the course of a minute or two. They seem to be highly associated with rivers. That might be because they are mating right now. And you can also see small juveniles hopping around. There's a Leptodeira ornata up on this wall here. This is one of the snakes that we're looking for. This is the snake I was talking about when we found the last tropical flat snake. As I said, this is the ornate cat-eyed snake. This is one of the most common snakes in this area, and practically a guarantee to find if you go searching for them at night a few times. This snake is heavily associated with water, specifically rivers and streams, and along with the fertile ants, they are the most common riparian snake species on the Osa Peninsula. This snake is from the same subfamily or family, depending on the taxonomy that you follow, as the tropical flat snake, that being Dipsadidae or Dipsadidae, but they aren't immediately related. These are not sister genera. This species has a very similar niche as the tropical flat snake. It's also semi-arboreal, has roughly the same diet, though it tends to have a preference for frogs and frog eggs, and it lives in the same habitats. What's really interesting is, of course, tropical flat snakes have uniquely pale heads, and when these ornate cat-eyed snakes are juveniles, the posterior side of their head and part of the neck is white. This fades to cream as they get older and eventually disappears. We have an Oryidae centipede crawling up this tree here. Can't really see it very well from here. There it is. These are commonly referred to as soil centipedes, and the one that we have here should be the longest one on the Osa Peninsula. And it could even be the longest centipede in Costa Rica, mostly because Costa Rica's Scolopendrids, or giant centipedes, are not very diverse and not very large either. I called this one an Oryidae. That's because it's from the family Oryidae. I've seen other soil centipedes from this family around here, but the really common one is kind of dinky and just a sandy brown color. Plus, this one seems to be far less common. This is the only one that I've seen as of yet. I've seen a centipede quite a bit similar to this one before in Colombia. That was also a soil centipede from the family Oryidae, and is very likely from the same genus. That one had a median stripe going all the way down its tergites, and it didn't have nearly as much of a pale cephalic plate like this one does. These are called soil centipedes, but seeing one up in a tree like we did is not unusual behavior, especially at night. I was late to start filming, but look at this. Our third tropical flat snake. Well, since I've already mentioned it a couple times before, this third tropical flat snake that we have does not have any parasites that I can see. And it's already quite large, though not a full-grown adult, so that's a good sign. As you might have been able to tell with the last two tropical flat snakes, this is quite a docile species, and one that I have never been bitten by before. This snake species is still venomous though, and the degree to which its venom is potent is still quite ambiguous. Apparently there have been cases of bites from the species, and symptoms have been negligible, but this is one of those snakes where so few people have been bitten that we really don't know what it is capable of. So I'm going to take the moment to say, don't let random rear-fanged snakes like this one chew on you. Try not to be the first person who experiences severe symptoms from some random rear-fanged snake, even if it's for science. These snakes, like I mentioned, are dipsadins, and we do have examples of relatively severe envenomations from that subfamily. Very last thing about this species, there's evidence that shows that females of this species seek out the nests of leafcutter ants to lay their eggs inside. Here in this tree we have a crab spider. This one back here. This crab spider, or Huntsman spider, is in the genus Olios. Not sure on the species though. You'll notice I didn't catch it on camera. These spiders are extremely flighty, or skittish. I can't handle the ones around here for more than a couple seconds before they disappear. That's why you see me holding it on this leaf. As you saw, we did find this one in a tree. These are almost exclusively arboreal. One of the only times that you'll see them on the ground is when they drop from a thread of silk. They often do this just to get from one place to another, but it's also a mechanism that they use to get away from predators. Of course, these are called crab spiders because of the way that their legs are oriented and fit together. This shape that they have allows them to slip into narrow crevices, as well as the homes that they build for themselves. These spiders are generally quite nomadic, which means that they generally don't have permanent residence in any given tree. However, when the females are ready to lay their egg sac, they fold a leaf in half and close it together with their silk. The entire inside is also lined with silk, but from the outside, the best way I can describe this home is like an empanada. Well, that will be all for this video of looking for tropical flat snakes or red-eyed tree snakes. Hope you enjoyed. Thank you for watching.